I love it so much, the long edit. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. This is the Fantasy Football Fanatics podcast. It is Tuesday, July 4th. Woo! Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm your host, Griffin Palmer, joined as always by CJ the Hitman Hickman and Jason Cabrera. What's up, guys?
What's going on, man?
Happy Independence Day.
And happy Independence Day as well, where a lot of your other shows you're listening to may be taking the day off. We are still here. Also, we wanted to take a moment to pause and say hello to all the listeners out there. I mean, we do this once every couple months, but obviously we're getting closer to football season. There's a big spike. We're growing by the thousands every week, it seems. So just wanted to peel back the curtain, say hi to everybody, kind of introduce ourselves yet again. So I'm Griffin. I'm your host / founder of the show. Just so you get an idea of kind of the way we do things, because we're all pretty different. I'm kind of the analytics guy. Rely pretty heavily usually on the statistical trends, the breakdowns. I take a that statistical informed approach to fantasy, as well as weighing everything, of course, against the eyeball test, and diehard Ravens fan. CJ, why don't you go?
Guys, I'm another co-host, co-founder of the show. I'm a wild card, super Eagles fan, and kind of an antagonist when it comes to fantasy football. That's kind of where I get my bread and butter.
Kind of,
just a little bit.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm Jason. I'm a co-host. I'm the newest guy here. I came on a little while after these guys started the show. I'm proud to be here. I'm considered the West Coast correspondent because I, unlike my other co-hosts here, I'm in Arizona. I'm on the West Coast. So all my West Coast people out there, you got a guy on here. I'm the balanced guy. I like to look for the perfect marriage of analytics and kind of the way I use my gut and team situation, player situation. I try to balance it all together to make the best possible decisions going forward. So, and I'm also a diehard Arizona Cardinals fan.
Appropriately so. So we got a Ravens fan, an Eagles fan, and a Cardinals fan. So we can't be too biased that way. We're all over the place. So as always, guys, we have an amazing show for you today. Today, we're going to be talking about some of our favorite tips and tricks to improve at fantasy football. And this isn't a show just for beginners. This is for veteran players as well. These are all tips that we think can really help take your game to that next level. Of course, we're going to be giving our final thoughts on our Contrarian Mock Draft. Everybody seemed to really like last week's episode, Friday's episode that was. So we didn't get through everything we had, so we're going to touch on it just a little bit more. And of course, bring you all the top headlines from around the league. As always, please make sure you guys subscribe to the show. We are on iTunes, Stitcher, really any podcast service. Make sure you subscribe wherever you are, and we greatly appreciate the support. You can follow the show as well on Twitter at the FF Fanatics. Easiest way to get a hold of us as a show. Stay in touch. Get the articles in between recordings. So that's the best way to get breaking news throughout the season for sure. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/thefantasyfootballfanatics. Most importantly of all, if you want to support the show, help us keep the lights on. If you're on YouTube, you see bright lights. Wow. We are on Patreon at patreon.com/thefantasyfootballfanatics. And you will get a lot of perks with that as well, including a bonus episode every single week. If 2 times a week is not enough for you, you can get a third show, and that third show tends to be much more advanced, much more user requested, in-depth topics. So it's a fun time over there. So check that out. And of course, as we have been mentioning for about a month now, if you guys want to play against us in fantasy football for the 2017 season, we have officially begun our search for our iTunes Listener League Review Challenge. All you have to do if you want to play against us, head over to iTunes, give us a rating, give us a review. Helps the show out a ton. Doesn't have to be a 5-star rating, though we greatly appreciate that. And, as we mentioned, helps the show out. And you will automatically be entered for a chance to be randomly selected to play against us in fantasy football during the 2017 season. Yeah. At the end of your review, make sure you leave us a Twitter handle or an email address so we can reach out to you guys if you are selected to play. So with that, let's move on to our warm-up question of the day. And we're going to, start with where we left off on Friday's show. We're going to talk about some of our final thoughts from our Contrarian Mock Draft. So just for the sake of breaking down our teams one last time, my team I went with the. We did this whole approach the opposite of how we generally play fantasy football, how we opposite of how we would generally do drafts in next month in August. So I generally go very late round quarterback, late round tight end. I therefore was forced to go very early quarterback, very early tight end. Had to do the whole round out the starting lineup, which most people would contest that it's a very newbie style the way I do it because very aggressive, drafting people at their ADP, at their normal value. So my team, which, don't get me wrong, I have some amazing starters, but, some of the shortcomings on my team are exactly why I don't draft this way. I have Aaron Rodgers as my quarterback. Fantastic. You can't go wrong with that. Ezekiel Elliott and Eddie Lacy at the running back position, so that worked out pretty well. At wide receiver, some boom-bust guys of Devontae Adams, Dante Moncrief. At the flex, I have Paul Perkins, tight end, Rob Gronkowski, kicker, Brian McManus, the Los Angeles Rams. On defense, I have Terrence West and Jamal Williams, running back, Green Bay rookie. I also have John Brown, Mike Wallace, Josh Doxson, and Ted Ginn Jr. as my backup bench wide receivers. CJ, who do you have?
I have Eli Manning as my quarterback. I went with Samaje Perine and Bilal Powell as my running backs. My wide receivers are Mike Evans, Michael Thomas, and Tyreek Hill. My tight end is Zach Ertz. My kicker is Roberto Aguado, and my defense is Atlanta's defense. My bench is Alvin Kamara. Then I took Adam Thielen, Darren Sproles, Kareem Hunt, and Willie Snead and Jarvis Landry.
Mm-hmm. Now, for the sake of just explaining also what happened there, you didn't because people are gonna be wondering why you're starting running backs Samaje Perine and Bilal Powell. You want to explain to the world?
I went with the zero RB approach. So I went. Normally, you got guys that just tickle with the thought and maybe go maybe 3 rounds the most. I went straight 5 rounds, no running backs, just all wide receivers until after the 5th round. After the 5th round, that's what was out there. Samaje Perine, a guy that I talked about a lot on this show. I was happy to pick him up. Bilal Powell, regrettably, I really did not want that, but hey, he's a starter. I'll put that out there. And I talked about last week's show that basically this approach, I feel that it benefits those that can be able to work the room, work trades, to be able to, move some players. I said that, out of Willie Snead and Jarvis Landry, I think that I'll probably go into this season, I would go with Willie Snead over Jarvis. So I would use Jarvis as trade bait and try to upgrade that system, my position in running back.
Well, scoring format will help you out there a lot too. One, obviously, a better PPR back. One has a little bit more boom bust potential to him. But we all like Willie Snead this year. Your wide receiver core, as you would expect, going 0 RB, drafting wide receivers in the first 5 rounds. Pretty good depth there. Jason, what about you? What was your team looking like?
All right. Well, I normally draft tight ends and quarterbacks usually around the mid rounds. I was supposed to take quarterback and tight ends much later in the draft. I did that with quarterbacks. I screwed up and forgot with tight ends. Which is why you'll hear the tight ends that I got.
Shame.
But shut up. Anyway, so my quarterback ended up being Carson Palmer, who I got in the 12th round, which honestly, I think I got a steal in Carson Palmer in the 12th round. So that worked out pretty okay for me. Running backs, I ended up with Marshawn Lynch and Joe Mixon. At wide receiver, I like my wide receiver core a lot. I got Jordy Nelson and Michael Crabtree as my starters. In the flex position, I got a couple of different options. I'd probably end up going with C.J. Anderson in the flex position. Tight end, Jimmy Graham. Sorry.
Great pick. Love kicker. Jimmy Graham, but yeah, you
right.
No
Especially
way you
where
got
I
him
got
late.
him. I think right where I got him is where he's going to go. My kicker ended up being Chris Boswell. My defense was the Jacksonville Jaguars, which, again, I think they're going to surprise people this year. Very, very updated defense they've got. And then on my bench, I got Deshaun Jackson, Eric Decker, Quincy Enunwa, Jordan Matthews. And then running backs, I got Kenneth Dixon and Joe Williams.
All right. So with that, let's go ahead and go around the room. You guys, what was one more thing to you that stood out? For me, one thing that I had was, I touched on this as we were signing off last week, Julius Thomas going in the 15th round, just the entire run of tight ends as a whole was kind of surprising to me. What were your guys' thoughts on the way tight ends played out?
I mean, as far as this was a PPR draft that we were doing, correct?
No, this was a standard league.
No.
Standard?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, I knew the big three were going to be there as far as Gronk, Jordan Reed, and then you got, Gronk, Kelsey, Reed. I knew the big three were going to be like that. Now, how the rest fell through, I think it was appropriate. I mean, I'm not. We talked about the show before. Me and Julius Thomas going to this season, not really a big fan. I'm not really buying into the whole. Now he's back with Adam Gates. His career is going to be rejuvenated and everything like that. I have to see it, to be honest, for me. But the rest of the way everything went down, I agree with it. I mean, even Hunter Henry and OJ Howard going above Cameron Brate. I mean, hey, that's what we're looking right now. I think Hunter Henry, they're gonna carve out a role for him and get him more involved. And I think Antonio Gates knows that, and he doesn't really need to be out there, like he was previous years. He's up in age, and if he's just really trying to get that record, he'll be able to do it this later in the season or early in the season, and maybe get that out the way. But I think Hunter Henry is going to have a big role with the Chargers this year.
I mean, he needs one touchdown, so I mean, in theory, it could be a short run, which would be amazing for Hunter Henry's value. Jason, what are your thoughts on the way that the tight end position kind of played out throughout the draft? Because I mean, it was surprising to me, some of the guys who went when they did.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple of spots I think were too high, and a couple spots I think were too low. Too low, definitely. Julius Thomas was way too low. I mean, I think he's. I don't necessarily think he's going to go back to his former glory, but I definitely think I would take him a bit higher up than the final round of the draft. I mean, the guy has shown he's awesome. Not only that, the person that drafted him got him as the second tight end. Their first tight end is Jordan Reed, so they're set at the tight end position.
Golden.
Kyle Rudolph is someone else I mentioned in the last show that I thought went way too late in the 11th round. That's crazy that he would go that late. I think he's going to have a great year. He had a fantastic year last year. So I definitely think he's somebody that should be higher. Delaney Walker, unfortunately, I think is someone that needs to be lower. He was taken in the 7th round, and I don't see him as a 7th round value. I like Delaney Walker, and I'm one of the first people that will say that he never gets the love he deserves. But given the amount of people that they have added to that offense and what they do specifically, that definitely brings his value down quite a bit. So I definitely think he's going to be much lower than where he is. Tyler Eifert, 6th round, I definitely wouldn't take him in the 6th round. He's just too much of an injury risk. So, like I said, a couple that were too high, a couple that were too low. Overall, where they were taken makes sense besides those examples.
Now, for starters, I agree with what you were saying, because Delaney Walker, the entire Tennessee Titans offense, as far as all the pass catchers go, especially now that they brought in Eric Decker, I have dropped them all further down in my draft boards. They've dropped down the rankings because there's just not enough targets to feed that many mouths. And Delaney Walker was a guy who I already kind of sunk in my rankings because obviously drafting Corey Davis, Rashard Matthews, which was very good last year, but there's only so many targets, and now Eric Decker in town as well. So Delaney Walker, and we talked about this, way back before draft season, how we thought that he was kind of flying under the radar, might be a guy you could get late and have that kind of upside potential. He's been finishing pretty consistently as a tight end 1, but he's one of those guys who for some reason never really gets picked as early as some of the people around him, but now we're all pretty low on him. So him going in the 7th round, that was kind of surprising to me. Julius Thomas, as I mentioned, which kind of sparked this whole conversation, going in the 15th round just blows my mind. And I understand some of the hesitation, kind of like where you're coming from, CJ, because people, they want to see it. But I think I saw more than enough.
New place.
Yeah, exactly. He's in a new place, but he's going to a system that he thrived in before, where he averaged about 12 touchdowns a year. And so, I mean, the way I have him statted out right now, I have him getting, as my tight end number 9, getting about 600 yards, but I gave him about 8 to 9 touchdowns, and that's just the way he worked out in my rankings right now. So if I can get Julius Thomas in the 15th round, that perfectly plays into my scenario.
Yeah.
I mean,
you know what? I'm surprised you didn't mention Griffin, is that Eric Ebron didn't even get drafted.
Oh, I was getting there. Don't you worry about that. Eric
That's his
Ebron.
boy. He's definitely going to talk about that.
That's his boy.
Eric
That's
Ebron.
That's that one child you have in the family that always does badly and does wrong, and you got that one parent that's oblivious to everything. Oh no, they're an angel. They're a darling. They have so much potential. No, he's a screw up. Just call it like it is, and disown him apart from the family.
That's rough.
But literally none of that is true. Eric Ebron has advanced.
Literally everything is what I said was true. What are you talking about?
Eric Ebron has increased in every statistical trend. All 3 years he's been in the league. He's gone up in receptions. He's gone up in yards. He's gone up in average yards per catch. The only reason he didn't finish as a tight end one last year was the touchdowns. One touchdown. That's the only reason that we're not talking about him in a completely different light.
It's always something. It's always something with him.
Tight end that doesn't catch touchdowns. I don't know.
It's always a crutch. It's always a crutch with Eric Ebron. You always got that good excuse.
Look, the trends are all facing directly towards the fact that he is going forward. The Lions clearly like him because they picked up the 5th-year option on his contract, so they have him in their long-term plans. He got a number of touchdowns, which were called back, which we've talked about quite a few times, and Anquan Boldin is gone, and Anquan Boldin recorded, 8 touchdowns last year, and those have to go somewhere. If Eric Ebron doesn't get those stupid penalties away from the play that negated some of his great plays, he gets some of Anquan Boldin's touchdowns, we're safely talking about a guy who's going to be a tight end one. So there's no way that I'm not drafting him.
So what you're saying, you're optimistic that those touchdowns are going to securely go to Eric Ebron versus those touchdowns could probably go to Golden Tate, a guy that built a nice chemistry with Matthew Stafford, or it can go to the running back, Abdullah that's coming back. Abdullah, that could be a part. He could be a guy that gets those touchdowns. Even a guy that had a terrible ending of last year, Marvin Jones can probably come back and do something, get those. It's not a guarantee that Eric Ebron is going to get these numbers, and no matter how much stuff you say that his statistics is rising as far as yards and receptions, which is nice, at the tight end position, you're going to need touchdowns, especially for him. He is not Travis Kelce, where you can just strictly go with yards and have a couple of touchdowns and go like, you know what, that's a good season for him. No, Eric Ebron needs to increase and do better in each aspect of the tight end position, and especially touchdowns. And if this bull crap with him and these penalties happen again next year, he should be off your list. No wonder he wasn't drafted. He's not reliable and he's not consistent.
I could not disagree with you more.
Of course, because this is your darling.
No.
Of course you're going to disagree with me.
Because every single trend points to the fact that you're wrong. And no, he's not going to get all of the touchdowns. Obviously, they're going to spread it out. But, I mean, if he gets 2 or 3 of those touchdowns that were called back last year, he's already a tight end one. We're talking about him differently. He gets 1 or 2 of those other ones from Anquan Boldin being gone. You know, we're talking about a guy who has the upside with the way he's trending with more yards, more receptions every single year throughout his career. He could easily be a guy who finishes high in the tight end ones. And I'm not saying that, it's going to all work out. The stars are going to align, but the stats and the trends are all there to back up this argument, and the Lions like him. I mean, I'll put it to you this way. I will take him 10 times out of 10 over a guy you guys are both high on, and O.J. Howard. You guys can have O.J. Howard. I will make a bet on that right now, in fact. So
which one of us drafted O.J. Howard?
Which one of you drafted O.J. Howard?
Which one of us drafted him?
The computer drafted him in this mock draft. I'm talking about in general. You guys are both very high on him. In fact, O.J. Howard going in the 9th round.
Not that high on him.
That's because you had already reached for Jimmy Graham at this point.
I didn't reach, first off. And secondly, O.J. Howard is a better tight end than Eric Ebron. He's going to be a better tight end. You know that. We've talked about that. Now, the fact
both
that he is
first-round
rookie
tight ends
is the only what's that?
They were both first-round top 10 tight ends.
Great. O.J. Howard is still a better tight end. Would you agree with that or disagree with that as far as being a pure player?
I don't actually know. I'd have to look at side-by-side stats.
Okay.
So he does not have the opportunity.
So what we're saying here is I don't have a problem with Eric Ebron. I'm not as low on him as CJ is. I haven't seen anything from him, which is the same thing that I'm going to say about O.J. Howard. We haven't seen anything from them. That's why they're not shooting up draft boards yet. So does he have the opportunity? Absolutely. Would I draft him over someone like a Jimmy Graham or even a Delaney Walker, where we've actually seen them hit their ceiling? Absolutely not. So you want to draft Eric Ebron, you go right on ahead, but you better not do it until those double-digit rounds, which I'm sure you'd be absolutely fine with.
You won't have to. I mean, his ADP is late in the double digits, if at all. This is a guy you're going to be able to pick up and play easily. And yet here we have O.J. Howard going in the 9th, which is insane because he's not going to play. He's in a timeshare, and he's a rookie. I would take David Njoku over O.J. Howard if we're talking rookies this year.
And again, by the way, he's not in a timeshare, okay?
Yes, he is.
So stop saying that.
Cameron Brate.
Not.
He is a rookie tight end.
Tight ends at the same time. Griffin.
Yes, you can. You absolutely can. But there's not a lot of targets of that. The Buccaneers offense does not have a huge target share compared to other passing teams around the league. He's going to be splitting in 2 tight end sets with Cameron Brate. Cameron Brate, they like in front of him. They've added 2 wide receivers as well this year, and they're going to be getting their running game going again.
That has nothing to do with the tight end position.
It has everything to do with fantasy, though.
No, you are comparing oranges to apples and trying to say, look how well these don't compare. Of course they don't compare. You're going to talk about the wide receiving core and how it's going to affect O.J. Howard being on the field? No. If O.J. Howard's on the field, he's going to be open. If he's open, he's going to get the ball. That's the bottom
Obviously.
line. Now, am I going to draft him in the mid-round? No, I'm not going to draft him in the mid-round. But I'm still high on him because he is going to be very good. He's a rookie. When I see more, then we'll draft.
I don't think he's going to be very good this year.
Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful for you. Congratulations. Pat yourself on the back. Can we move on?
I'm very excited to be right about this.
Like a half an hour talking about your point on the Contrarian Draft.
Well, you guys were the ones that decided to fight me on it, so I'm going to defend it. Let's move on. Who wants to go next?
It up. Okay.
I was just simply pointing out Julius Thomas, and you guys opened up the whole Eric Ebron wormhole, so when do you guys go next?
Oh, my God. Listen, what is next? What do you want to talk about now, guy?
Oh, my goodness. All right. So one thing I was going to bring up is the fact that there seems to be a wide receiver hole in the middle of this draft that I found very interesting. It starts in the end of the 4th round, and it kind of continues on until you get near the end of the 6th round. It's really strange because you start getting like Devontae Adams and Sammy Watkins. These are both boom-bust players that we don't really like, especially in the 4th round. Martavis Bryant, again, that seems a bit high to me. And you got guys like Brandon Marshall, Willie Snead, that went in the 5th round. Again, these are players that, if that wasn't your 4th player, CJ, your 4th wide receiver, rather, I would have been really upset about him going that high in the draft. And then there's nothing, again, until you start, Kelvin Benjamin, again, scary. I wouldn't take him. Moncrief, we don't know a whole lot about. And then Golden Tate shows up. So it's really interesting. From about the end of the 4th through the 6th, there's not a lot of really solid wide receivers that belong in those rounds. And I mean, that's from my perspective. What do you guys think?
I agree with you. If I didn't do this approach, I most likely Willie Snead would have dropped to me. I probably wouldn't have gone after him. If he was there, I probably would have picked him up probably in the 6th or 7th round.
He's going in the 7th currently.
7th?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Then I would have been cool about that. The other Kevin Benjamin, his status right now with the weight gain, that is a big issue.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's not a tight end. He can be used as a tight end if that's what he wants to do. But as far as an offense, he's be looked at as their number 1 receiver. So to have that going on, that's a big issue there. You guys heard extensively when I talk about Sammy Watkins how much I disapprove of where he's going, and just how low I think of him just because of the health concern. I mean, he doesn't stay healthy enough for me to be able to play all 16 games. That's an issue. Kind of like how you feel about Keenan Allen. That's how I feel about Sammy Watkins. And I forgot, what was the other person you mentioned again?
I just in general was mentioning the fact that there's kind of a big hole right in the middle of the draft. I said Dante Moncrief.
Oh, Moncrief. Yeah. Because Griffin picked Moncrief, and I agree with his points with him. As it stands right now, Moncrief is very touchdown dependent. He has the potential to be a lot better. I like the relationship he has with Andrew Luck, but as it stands right now, Griffin's point is very accurate. That right now he's very touchdown dependent. If he can change that game and up it, I think that he has the potential to rival T.Y. Hilton in that offense as being 1A 1B kind of as a starting wide receiver. But that elevation of his game needs to show. I mean, if that does, and I think you have a good dual threat wide receiver approach, kind of like and I know I just talked negatively about this last week, but Michael Crabtree and the other kid's name, I forgot his name. Amari Cooper. You got that. when they're both on, those are great wide receivers to have. And if you get one of them, you got that connected to that great quarterback and Derek Carr, you can't go wrong. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what you kind of looking at the Colts if everything works out.
Well, to your point, Jason, which was where you're coming from. Yeah, there is a kind of strange gap from rounds 4 really to round 7. There's not a lot of wide receivers being taken, but that's there's a lot of contributing things that are going there. I don't think it's a lack of talent for a wide receiver at that point. I think it's just a matter of the way that people play fantasy, the way drafts kind of fall to you. Obviously, the wide receiver position is the deepest position in fantasy football. Teams line up 2 to 3 of them every single play. They go out there, and therefore, for fantasy purposes, we're getting points from them. The position is very top heavy. There's probably 20, 30 some guys that most people would say they're super comfortable taking. Then it gets a little diluted from there. People have a lot of question marks once you start getting outside of the second round even. So and at this point we've got teams, but after the 4th round, a lot of teams will usually have 2 wide receivers. People that are doing a more standard draft strategy are starting to get their tight ends and their quarterbacks and heaven forbid, kickers and defenses. We see that with brand new players. Don't ever do that, listeners. Don't ever take a kicker or a defense in single-digit rounds. But I just think it's the way the draft kind of falls is that they're naturally trying to fill other positions. Because obviously we see Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady going in the 2nd and the 3rd round in this mock draft, but then 5th round, 6th round, 7th round, a bunch of other quarterbacks went off the board. So I think it's just roster composition more than it is lack of talent at the position in that range. So that's what I would say. CJ, what is the one more point that stood out to you from our mock draft before we finalize and put this draft to rest?
Well, one thing that I saw that was very puzzling to me, and as a guy that you actually were believing in a couple seasons ago, I wanted your thoughts about him, is Devontae Parker been taken in the 8th. Is that too high, or is it about the right frame of where he should go? And then, what are you really expecting from Devontae Parker this season?
Well, Devontae Parker, his average draft position is in the 8th round, so he went right where he should have. It's one of those things where he has all the measurables, all the stats. He passes the eyeball test. Everyone's saying that he has that frame and that build to be that next true elite top-tier wide receiver. He just needs to take that next step. And, of course, everything we're hearing out of Miami right now with Adam Gase and all these skill position players is that every single one of these guys look like they're posed to have a breakout year. And, if every one of these players lives up to expectations, the Miami Dolphins in 2017 are going to set NFL records across the board, which, let's be real, that's not going to happen. I love Adam Gase. I love his offense. I think it's great for fantasy. But when Ryan Tannehill's your quarterback and that offensive line is as suspect at certain points around it as it is, it's just not going to play out that way. So I think Devontae Parker has everything that it would take for him to be the fantasy number 1 receiver on that team. Obviously, Jarvis Landry, he's obviously the big PPR guy. But Devontae Parker, he just has that upside. So it's possible, and if he delivers on value, he could be an amazing steal in the 8th round. But I don't know, with Julius Thomas there, as we've talked about extensively previously, I'm expecting him to eat into a lot of the touchdowns. I think he's going to be their main red zone target, probably with Devontae Parker. Kenny Stills is back, who's their speedy outside threat, so that's taking up targets. We know Jay Ajayi, they're expecting to use him more in the passing game as well. So I'm just not sure how many targets there are to go around to make all of these guys relevant. In the 8th round, I'd be willing to take a shot at him because at that point you're looking for upside players, and Devontae Parker has a ton of upside, especially if one of these players goes down. But at this point, pre-training camp and pre-watching them, what they're kind of working on in preseason, I wouldn't be too comfortable going drastically higher than where he's going right now. I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts on it? Jason, do you have any thoughts on Devontae Parker?
Not really. Like I said, it's one of those things where I need to see more.
All right.
I got you.
Did you have any specific thoughts, or were you just kind of curious about it yourself, CJ?
I was curious just because, I've talked about him before, kind of with the Jason's approach, want to see it. But, this is going to be his second season, right? This is second year?
Devontae Parker? This will be his
this second or third year?
or fourth year.
Maybe.
I should
It
know
might
this.
be his third year.
I will
Yeah,
confirm.
it could be his third year. And if that's the case, then it comes with that, that saying, that third season, that's where they get it. And I agree with you that he has great measurables and he can be able to be that guy. But once again, I agree with you when you say there's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense, and it's kind of like how we feel about Corey Davis. Before the Eric Decker signing, we thought it was going to be the world of Corey Davis. We love his measurables. We love what he can do better do in the offense. But now with more mouths in there, it's very hard to realistically look at him and say, he's going to be that guy and be able to get these amount of numbers and get these amount of points for you, when it's just unlogical to be able to think that just because of all the weapons out there. It's not realistic. So that's when I saw his name there, I was just like, yeah, I kind of feel like that's, even if the computer took him, it was just like, you know what, hey, yes, he's going around this round, but let me just take a shot in the dark at him. If he works out, he does. If he doesn't, then I drop him.
For the record, I was right. It's his third year. But I mean, we're talking about a guy. He's 6'3", 212. He's got really long arms, great hands. He's fast. So I mean, all the measurables are there. We just have to see him put it together. So with that, let's move on to some of the top headlines from around the league. Not too much to talk about today. Again, this is the offseason, but some interesting bits of news that are definitely worth talking about. And some of these are stories that are just kind of gaining more traction as we're in this kind of lack of news area. For starters, ESPN's Adam Schefter says that, and this was in an interview he had with SiriusXM Radio, that he was, quote, hesitant to draft Ezekiel Elliott in fantasy leagues because of the uncertainty going on with him currently around the NFL's ongoing investigation. Now, this was a story all the way back from last year where he was being implicated in a domestic assault situation, which was basically thrown out because they had all this evidence saying, and he apparently had all this stuff to corroborate a story about how it was an ex-girlfriend, and he had all these texts talking about how she was going to set him up for this, and he had it all saved and good to go. So, I mean, he was not even affected by it last season. Obviously had a great rookie year, but the NFL has kind of been quietly continuing this investigation. It seems to be gaining some traction, so we're not exactly sure how it's going to play out. So we're seeing people saying that they're hearing stuff that is causing them to give some pause to Ezekiel Elliott, obviously going as a top 3 pick in fantasy this year. What are your guys' thoughts here? Because obviously, going down the line, this could be facing, if he ends up getting suspended by the league, this would be a detriment to your fantasy team. What are your guys' thoughts?
I'm going to be watching the news extremely closely. That's my thought. I mean, we don't know anything, literally. We know nothing about this situation right now other than the fact that there is an investigation. But we don't know. I mean, it could just be more of the same of what already happened. Therefore, it means absolutely nothing. It could mean everything. He could not play this year. So all we can do really is just keep your eye on the news and continue to mock draft. And when you're mock drafting, maybe mock draft something without Ezekiel Elliott in there. Don't draft him. Keep him out of your draft and see how it falls to you and all that kind of fun stuff, so that you're ready if that does happen.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with you guys, man. This is one area where you don't want fantasy to start rolling over reality. You want to make sure that the judges and the investigation goes full all the way through. Get all the evidence out there. If his name is clear, let his name be clear. If something comes up, let it go ahead and be taken care of, because you don't want this thing to linger and go on when it comes to the season starting, because then you draft them high, it's gonna suck. When they come out, they a 4 or him be suspended 10 games, that's gonna suck for a guy that you drafted pretty high.
I mean, losing anybody in the early rounds for an extended period of time would suck, and this would be obviously one of your main workhorse players on your team. So watch the news, and of course we'll report as we learn more, but it was interesting to see that this seems to be gaining some traction here, and a lot of this is happening behind closed doors, so we, as Jason mentioned, we don't really know much because not a lot of this has been made public yet. This is just kind of news that's happening around the league and what people are hearing in whispers, so we're going to keep an eye on the Ezekiel Elliott situation. I can't talk. Let's move on. Last bit of news that we have today. Jamal Charles is saying, quote, "I feel like the way I am cutting that I am back to the normal me, man," end quote. Now, I bring this up, and this could be considered kind of like an best shape of his life off-season trope, but we've also been hearing a lot of stuff out of Denver's camp that he is looking like the old Jamal Charles. In fact, that he is looking incredibly well, doing all the drills. Obviously, he would be the best pass-catching back in Denver. A lot of people are starting to speculate that if he's back to the old Jamal Charles, which obviously we used to talk about him as a top 3 fantasy running back, an amazing, talented back in the league, just dealing with some serious knee injuries. If he's back to that shape, he could be really pushing for the starting job in Denver. So, I mean, that would be a huge bump to a guy that most people are kind of sleeping on. A lot of people think his career could be done. He might be just kind of a change of pace back. But a lot of reports that we've been hearing, this is why we haven't really reported on it to this point, because it's just been like a beat reporter here, a rumor there. But it's all starting to kind of gain traction. What are you guys' thoughts? Do you think Jamal Charles has a chance at the age of 30 to kind of reclaim the former glory of being the workhorse main back in a new team?
I need to see training camp. I gotta see. Everybody looks good with shorts on. That's just real. Everybody looks good. And everybody can feel great and feel like they're cutting, doing all that stuff, and that stuff could be true. I need to see a training camp when pads are on, bodies hitting bodies, and let's see what happens when that goes through, and then you see what those reports are. Wait a couple weeks after that, and then we'll go from that. I mean, we know what his track record is. We know this dude. But one thing we also know, these injuries have been hurting him and keeping him out of fantasy and kept him out of him being good for your team. So until you can be able to see this dude take a hit, and the reports are that he's good and he's still cutting and being like his old self, then go, by all means, go for it. But until then, I'm waiting.
Jason, anything to add?
Yep. Best shape of his life.
Best shape of his life.
Yeah. That's all wonderful and happy and good and stuff like that. But like CJ said, everybody looks fast in shorts. He needs to put the pads on and actually play. Could he reclaim his former glory? Absolutely. This guy is an absolute beast when he's healthy. But there's the rub. When he's healthy, he's rarely healthy. So if he can be rejuvenated, if he can come in, he absolutely can win that starting position, and he could be great.
Yeah, I think we all like the upside of Jamal Charles over C.J. Anderson. I mean, I'm a big C.J. Anderson supporter here, but I mean, if Jamal Charles is able to get back to Kansas City Chiefs form 2013, 2014, I mean, that's just a different breed of running back. 30 years old, as we mentioned, he'll turn 31 towards the end of the year. I just kind of keep going back to an interview that he had around this time last year where he was saying he doesn't want to be that running back, which kind of gets phased out over time. He wants to play as long as he feels like he can be elite, and then he's going to retire. So clearly he believes it, and I mean, not just from the statement that he's made, but just the action of signing with this new team, showing up to all the offseason training, getting there, getting all this work and repetitions. I mean, I expect him to be pushing for that starting job, which is now starting to make me adjust my rankings slightly. I'm moving him up a little bit. I mean, obviously not making big adjustments like CJ said until training camp for sure, but moving him up, moving CJ Anderson down a little bit. It's stuff to definitely take pause and take note of. So, all right, with that, let's move into our top headlines that was top headlines. We're going to move into our topic of the day, which is our tips and tricks to becoming better at fantasy football. Now, as we mentioned in the intro to the show, these aren't going to be obvious in your face like, oh, look, you're new to fantasy football. This is what you should do. These are all kind of things that we think that can really take anyone's game to that next level. It doesn't matter your experience level. So with that, any of you guys really want to go first here? Do you have anything that you're itching to get off to kick this section off?
I think you should go first, man. I'm looking at these tips It's an autobiography. So why don't you go first? Okay.
As always, excuse me for being prepared and having a lot of notes. I'll start with one of mine.
It's called overkill. So
no,
go ahead and do your thing. But.
In fact, it's called being prepared. CJ, you could learn a thing or two.
Is it?
So let's move on.
Is it really?
It sure is. So first one I'm going to get to is that you don't give up on your season. Now, a lot of people, and men, you see this all the time. We had people write in last year. We were preaching this early in the season. I see this all the time because I played in, well into the double digits of leagues. I can't talk tonight. And
take your time, buddy.
You will.
Take your time.
I know, right? We'll see where a team will get down early in the season. They'll be going out. They'll be like 1-3, 1-4, heaven forbid 1-5, and people will give up on the year. Now, that is not only it's going to make it much easier for the rest of the league, but you are going to be missing out on this opportunity to not only play fantasy football, which we wait all year to play, but a learning experience. You have to ride out your season. There's a lot of reasons for this, and this is what will make you better. I can't tell you how many times I've seen teams that start off 1-4 and come back and win their league because people start off their season doing all this research. People are listening to podcasts like these. They're on the websites. They're looking at the stats and the trends. They get a really good team together at the draft, but then they don't put the work in throughout the rest of the year. So that team only gets you so far, and then as injuries happen, as bye weeks happen, as all these things start to happen, these teams that looked really, really good start losing games here and there, where the teams that are really kind of staying plugged in, they're learning every single week, they're watching the waiver wire, they're watching the trends, they're using everything that they can, not just for this year, but for the opportunities going down the line, and you can build that team. You can resurrect your season. And really, this is going to challenge you to do the research and learn more about what's going on around the league. If your season's already way over, we're talking double-digit rounds, you're out of the playoffs, you're going to be learning good information to take into next year. Most people, as I mentioned, they stop researching after their drafts, and this is that stuff that really helps you prepare for the following year. We're talking about all these injuries, all these trends, what people did towards the end of the year, these up-and-comers, flashes that we saw late in the season. All of this stuff is what we're basing our articles on, our rankings, all the talk that we're hearing, interviews that are happening around the league with head coaches and coordinators. This is how we're able to weigh what they're saying against what we know and can expect. And just full circle, and this ties into what I was saying earlier, you just don't win your league at the draft. We say this all the time. You build your foundation. So just stay plugged in throughout the year. You'd be shocked at what you can learn, and you have a very realistic chance of making your way back into the season and being competitive by just simply staying active, making trades, working the waiver wire. That's all you have to do. What are you guys' thoughts on riding out the season? If you throw in the towel, you don't benefit anything from that. And that's what, sadly, I would say most people do as soon as they get at a disadvantage.
Well, I've had highs and lows in fantasy football, and the highs are awesome. And of course, you want to continue to do that, but there comes lows, and just like your point, I agree with that. You gotta fight your way through. Don't punk out and just take an L. Fight back. Get better. Look what your mistakes have been, and use the information that we give you, information that you get somewhere else, and to be able to put that and apply it to, you getting better each and every week. You got waiver wires, you got trades you can be able to do. Just continue to not give up. Put forth effort each and every week. I mean, look, yeah, you got an L. Well, guess what? What you gonna do better? What you gonna do better next week? So just keep going forward. And I just say, just like Griffin was saying, just continue to stay active, man. Don't give up. And because look, man, I mean, look, unless you're in our league, if you want to give up and I'm playing you, by all means, lay down. So lay down, man.
CJ loves those easy wins.
I appreciate the assists, but for real, don't do that, man. You wait too long for this. Come on, man. Just stay in the game, baby.
Jason, what are your thoughts?
Not last year, but the year before, I believe I started the season with 4 straight losses.
Ouch.
And it was demoralizing. I mean, you lose and then you lose again and you lose again, and it's just like, what? But you know what? I ended the season. I think I was 3rd overall, something like that.
In our league of
record. The bottom
record?
line is this: in our league of record.
You met me in the Super Bowl that season, I thought.
Oh, that's right, I did.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, I did. The year before that, I met you in the championship game. So
Yep.
The bottom line is, you don't give up. you don't ever give up, man. You keep pushing. You hit the waiver wire. You try to trade if you need to trade. Get rid of the garbage. Get rid of the people that are hurt. Get rid of everything that you think you need to get rid of. Hit the waiver wire. Look for those young rookies. They're going to start. We talked about this. I think one of the first shows I was on here. We talked about the fact that you want to start looking for rookies around the middle of the season when they're going to start surging forward. Around Halloween time frame, rookies start coming out and start playing better. So there's always a chance to get back in it.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. This is what will make you better. It's going to challenge you to do better, and all this research pays off down the line. This season, next season, preparation, everything. So don't give up. Ride out your season. That's one of the main points I have to make because so many people check out, and if you don't check out and other people in your league do, guess what? Easy chance for you to work your way back in. So, all right, who wants to go next?
I'll go next, man. A strategy that I use and I continue to do each and every year, and it might be common to some people, man, but I just can't help but preach this more. Scout the players, the teams that they play for, man, when you're trying to draft them. Like, for me, I was starting out, man, and I use this because this is my baby, and I love this dude in his fantasy football. Antonio Brown. When he first came out, man, I saw him playing with Mike Wallace and, young Ben Roethlisberger throwing the ball in preseason. I'm like, well, first of all, I know this team. At that time, this team was all about throwing the ball with big men. So I'm like, okay, I'll look at the opportunities that are there. I see the skills that a young Antonio Brown was bringing in, not only in the special teams, but also as a pass catcher. I said, you know what, this is going to be a good marriage. Put some more time in, looking at him. And went ahead and drafted him and held on to him. And every year that I've had him, it's been nothing but good success when it comes to that. Another guy that I liked and did research on was Hunter Henry when he first started coming out. I was like, you know what, this dude's going to be a nice piece to be able to add on to this Chargers offense, especially when Antonio Gates be able to move on. We saw a small glimpse of what he was able to do. And with that, him connected with Phil Rivers, who throws the ball and likes to throw the ball to his tight end, I think that's going to be a good marriage. I think you're going to see a lot of that this year, and then for years to come. So I can't stress this much, man. That I can't stress this enough. Scout the players that you're looking at drafting and the teams of what's going on. Look at team needs. Look at team schemes, what they like to be able to do, because you can be able to benefit from that. If a team that likes to run the ball more and you went ahead and drafted, or going to draft Leonard Fournette, hey, listen, that's going to be a good piece. They want to take pressure off of Blake Bortles because they're not really believing in him as throwing the ball that much. So they want to take the ball out of his hands. So what they're going to do, they're going to run the ball. So that means Leonard Fournette's going to get more opportunities, more points, more touches for you in fantasy football. So that's just a couple things I look at, and I just want to put that out to you.
Yeah, it comes down to obviously knowing which offenses are better fantasy offenses, and that's pretty obvious. You're going to take probably a number 2 wide receiver on, say, the Packers or the Saints over maybe the top options in an offense like the Rams, for instance. So, knowing the teams and the players, therefore, with the good opportunities. Jason, what are your thoughts?
On his, or am I doing mine next?
Either or. We can move on if you'd like.
Sure, buddy.
No, it's cool. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the team, there are fantasy players that can play very well despite the fact that they're on a crap team. Isaiah Crowell had a decent year last year, and yet he was on arguably one of the worst teams in NFL history. So there are those kind of situations. However, if you've got a quarterback who is not good, and you've got a wide receiver that could be good, DeAndre Hopkins is a perfect example of that, it's a situation that's not necessarily good. So you have to know the situation that's around the player, not just how good the player is. And we've talked about that extensively. I mean, you talk about who's a better tight end. We were just saying O.J. Howard or Eric Ebron. Well, if you look at the measurables, O.J. Howard is arguably a better tight end. But he's a rookie, and he's in a situation where he may not be the number 1 pass-catching guy as a tight end in that offense. That could possibly be the situation. Maybe Cameron Brate gets the ball more often. So the situation is important to understand as well.
All right. Well, you want to lead in your first point, Jason?
Sure. My first point is I call it's a trap. It's my Admiral Akbar for you. It's a trap. Don't trust big numbers, okay? Don't look at these eye-popping numbers and go, oh, man, look at that. Julio Jones, perfect example. 300 yards in a single game. That is amazing. That is phenomenal. That's week winning. That happened one time. Okay? 16 games you got to worry about. That happened one time. So, please, don't look at one game and get what we call recency bias. Don't think, oh, man, he's going to do that all the time, because he didn't. Okay? So, pay attention. Pull the player's years. Look at his past years. Look from game to game. Look for the average line. Where do they averagely play? And does it go up? Does it go down? Are there certain points in the season where he kind of disappears? Look at Zach Ertz, for example. Perfect example. He disappears until near the end of the season, and we've talked about that extensively. So understand these players and understand that when there's a fluke or when there's an anomaly in their numbers, that's not the norm. You should never draft based on that one anomaly.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this last week where if you take that 300, speaking about obviously Julio Jones here, your point you're making, if you take out that 300-yard, one-touchdown game that he had, he'd finish as a wide receiver too. So him going in our mock draft as the number one fantasy wide receiver was a little confusing, to say the least. So, the big numbers can be misleading, and, you'll find people who will sell out to try and get those players, that they'll really react to that big week, the big news, whatever the case may be, and you can maybe take advantage of that. But, it's not something to necessarily sell out for unless it's something that you think is repeatable or it's an opportunity that has a chance to keep presenting itself throughout the season. Some of these guys, they're going to flash.
Have another, I'm sorry. I do have another part of this.
All right.
And that is another possible trap that a lot of people fall into. Big names, okay? Just because someone has a name that you've heard doesn't necessarily mean that this is a good thing, that this is somebody that I want to target, someone I want to go for. Adrian Peterson's a perfect example, okay? He's a big name. He's one of the greatest, right? But am I going to spend a high draft pick on him this year? Probably not, because of the situation he's in. And this kind of plays into what CJ was saying too. You have to know the situation around them, what team they're on. Their name is not what you're drafting. You are drafting their stats, So you've got to know what's going on. Don't fall for the trap.
Adrian Peterson, just FYI, has almost worked his way back up into the third round already.
Wow.
Goodness.
It's getting pretty intense.
I mean, hey, he could absolutely return on value, but it's really scary because it's a new team, and he's been injured a heck of a lot.
And there's quite a committee there right now.
Yep.
CJ, do you have anything to add to this before we move on?
No, I agree. I agree with Jason's saying. That's a good point.
All right. Well, my next point is one of those things that might seem a little obvious, but I can't stress enough how important this is to increasing your chances of doing well in fantasy football, especially in your own league, and that is to simply know your league. There are so many things that you have to take into account, because, and as CJ made points about this all the time, you can't take everything we say as, the word, and that's what you need to do, because every league is different. So it comes down to many different layers of what you need to know. Of course, you have to know your league scoring format, which is essential. I mean, we hear about people all the time. I mean, in our league of record, we had some folks who didn't realize certain things were happening, and they've been in the league for 4 years in scoring formats. So, I mean, obviously know, is it standard? Is it half-point PPR? Is it PPR full point? Is it 2 quarterback? Some leagues do points per rush, points per pass. Some leagues give bonus points to returns. Some give bonus points when players do things outside their normal role, i.e. a running back catching the ball or a wide receiver running, things of that nature. They give big bonuses for milestone markers like 100 yards, whatever the case may be. These are all essential facts that you need to know to make decisions, especially when we're talking about draft season. If you're in a PPR league, that's a huge bump to players like a Jarvis Landry who we were talking about before, who is going to get a ton of receptions off of a ton of targets. Not a huge big play player, at least not consistently, but a huge buff there. Also, and that's pretty obvious, that's just right off the top, you also need to learn your league. You have to know how the rest of your league plays fantasy football, because this is insight for the entire season and how things are going to go. Obviously, knowing like how they draft. Like for me personally, and you'll probably be able to do this as well if you're in any league with people you know that you've been in for an extended period of time. You'll get to know players in your league. You'll know who they tend to draft, who they tend to target, who they tend to value, who they like, and you can like I actually do little kind of write-ups so I can keep that in mind. Of course, we do auction drafts, which is a whole different animal, which we're going to be getting into very soon. I can't wait to talk auction. We love auction here. But knowing, who do you think you can maybe wait on? Who do you think might fall in drafts? Who you might have to reach for because he plays for such and such's team and that guy really likes that player as well. So if you really want that player X, you might have to reach for him. It's all stuff that you kind of have to take into account. Also, know the way that your league interacts throughout the season, specifically when it comes to things like trading. Some players won't trade at all. They just won't. They think, I drafted this team. This team is what I'm going to go with. They got me here. Other teams or owners are very suspicious to all trades because they don't know how to do research on their own. Others will make silly, stupid trades. Others will be the ones that are out there trying to win trades, which I always think is kind of dumb. I mean, we get trade questions all the time. All the time. And bottom line, it's never... And this is the way most people look at trades, and this is kind of a side rant. They always look player X against player Y, who wins the trade. And that's not really what it comes down to. It's not, who's going to end the season higher. It's team need, team specific. That's why you're trading. You have a role you need to fill in your team. They have a role that they need to fill in theirs. You're making a swap to better both teams. Otherwise, what are you doing? So, I mean, but there are players out there who are going to look to win trades, things of that nature. And knowing what approach they're going to do is going to make negotiating a trade and possibly being able to just trade in general much more doable. And I always say, and I know not everybody on the show is as in agreement to this, but to me, if you're not trading, you're not trying, because the team I draft is not going to be the team I end with. Guaranteed. I trade a lot because I'm trying to avoid things like injuries and bye weeks and things of that nature. Think about the way that your teammates they work the waiver wire. How active they are. If they're players that they like, if they're people that are going to try and get the new hot player, a player that broke out, kind of to a previous point that we just made. If you're in a free agent acquisition, free agent acquisition budget. How much they're going to spend. I mean, I go back to our league of record, was it 2 years ago, where Le'Veon Bell went down and D'Angelo Williams was up for grabs, and we have a fab system, and Jason here very intelligently spent over 50% of his fab on D'Angelo Williams, and if he hadn't, guess what? There was 3 other players in our league, myself included, who made a pretty sizable bid on him. So, knowing your league, knowing your needs, knowing how to approach the waiver wire, and knowing who they're going to target based on, again, teams that they like, what they look for, if they watch the headlines, if they're trying to go after that player that broke out last year. Different players in your league have tendencies, and if you look back over your league's history, it's very easy to kind of watch the trends, and this is something I do pretty extensively. And so we talk about scoring formats, we talk about knowing your league mates, and just knowing the way everybody interacts and how they react to news. It's all stuff that you can exploit and that you can potentially use to your advantage down the line. So getting to know your league is a huge competitive advantage. So it's not all fantasy football, it's not all stats, it's the human element as well. What are your guys' thoughts? I kind of rambled on there for a little bit, but it's something that you can really go into. We could probably do a whole show on this.
I think it's good. It's good. I think this is good research for people to be able to do in an individual league that can be able to eat up some time, especially until we start getting in training camp and stuff like that. If you've been in a league with somebody so many years, and if this strategy starts to get used to you, stop being so predictable. Switch it up. You know what I mean? Update your fantasy IQ as far as players that you normally would normally draft. Switch it up and go with somebody else. I mean, do something different. But I agree with what you're saying, though. I think this is good information.
I think we're all guilty of that. We all have kind of those guys that we know, like, this is not just dynasty or keeper leagues. Everyone's got their guys that they target, that they like. And guess what? After you've targeted that player more than 2 years in a row, people are going to notice. So just putting that out there.
Get tagged.
Yeah, people will reach to grab a guy that they know that you like so they can use it as trade bait, or if you're in an auction league, they might bid you up, whatever the case may be, and that just comes down to knowing your league mates. Jason, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, one thing I want to say is I did spend over half my fab to get D'Angelo Williams. But you know how much of my fab I spent after that? None. I did not spend a single dime of my fab after I got D'Angelo Williams.
Pull the trigger when it's smart.
Exactly. You save that fab and you use that fab for players you know. And this goes back to Griffin's point. You need to know your league and know who's going to be targeting what, who's going to be looking at what. Whenever I targeted somebody, most of the time there was maybe one other person that was interested in them, and I really didn't need to use my fab that much. So knowing your league is very, very important. Perfect example of that, somebody tried to bid me up in our auction league on Larry Fitzgerald. I had Larry Fitzgerald on my team every single year, and this person, because he thought he was funny and thought he was smart, thought he'd go ahead and just bid me up. And bid me up again, and bid me up again. I said, okay, you go ahead and have it, Yep. And I moved on. And I picked somebody else. It sucked. I like having Larry Fitzgerald on my team, but
great
you know
PPR
what?
wide receiver.
And if you don't mind, I'm gonna let this lead into one of my points, CJ, if that's okay.
Go for it.
Love is for chumps, not champs. Draft with your head, not your heart. Don't, as Griffin already said, don't fall in love with a player and get them no matter what. Don't give up the world to get one player, even if it's the best player in the league, okay? I am a huge David Johnson fan, okay? But I had a plan when I went to go get him, and everything worked out the way I wanted it to, and people freaked out, oh, my gosh, you spent so much money on him. Yeah, but you know what? I had a plan. I knew exactly how much I wanted to spend, and I didn't go over that cap, So if it had gone too high, I would have stopped, and I would have gone and got somebody else. So,
Jason, what is too high? You spent so much money.
I'm not telling you that.
He spent a fifth of his auction budget.
And I won the league. And I won the league, didn't I?
You had a good matchup in the playoffs. Anyway.
Oh, my goodness. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Keep going.
Why don't you shut up, okay?
Ooh, spicy.
Every
the competitive edge.
He lost the league. He's just like, oh well, it was this and that. It was this and that. There were these insinuating circumstances. Bottom line was, you weren't even in the championship game, Griffin.
I mean, I can miss a year during my dynasty.
There's always a way out for you.
These players are human. Okay, they're gonna get hurt. They maybe have a bad week. We've seen guys get suspended. Okay. Whatever happens, you need to be ready for that. So don't fall in love with a player and just have eyes only for that player. Along the same lines, and it's funny who this is coming from, but you need to avoid homer picks for homer picks' sake. You love your team, and that's fantastic. That's what makes this fun, is we get to watch our team and follow our team. But don't pick somebody just because they're on your team. You need to look at their stats and make sure they're going to do something for you, okay? If you're a Houston fan, and you want Watson or Savage because you think that's great, and I get my team's quarterback, well, that's wonderful, except neither one of them is a proven commodity, and I definitely wouldn't go out and get those guys.
Nope.
And by the way, those guys are going to be available for you on the waiver wire.
Easy.
So hold off, wait, and trust the stats, guys. Look at the stats. Trust what you're seeing. Don't pick them because they're on your team. Pick them because their stats tell you that they're going to be good for you this year.
And it's a good point. I mean, even me personally, as a big Ravens fan, I never target Ravens. I think the only Raven I've ever targeted with any form of consistency was Ray Rice, and that's because, for fantasy purposes, he was pretty consistently a top 5, top 10 running back before, obviously, his career went downhill very rapidly. So, it's a very valid point. There are players you're going to want and you're going to reach for a little bit, but don't spend the world on them. It's insane. You're crippling your team at other areas, and when you're drafting players at positions that you could let fall to you, and you're hurting the upside of your team. Or an auction, you could cripple your draft capital, and then you're going to be stuck watching all these players that you could have gotten for a good value go to other players because you don't have the money to bid on them. And again, we'll get to auction drafts soon. I can't wait. Man, I can't wait to talk auction. But it's all very, very valid points. And the sad thing is, most people are super homer based. I can't tell you how many leagues I get in, and I'll do a couple of these every year as well, just completely randomized leagues. I'll go to like NFL.com, join a random league, and you'll see these teams that have like the Jets as their logo, and man, we'll walk out of that draft, and last year he had Matt Forte, he had Brandon Marshall, he had Quincy Enunwa, he had Ryan Fitzpatrick, he had the Jets defense, and I was like, what are you doing? So yeah, it's a thing, and more people than not. Obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably a breed above that. You're probably not making that kind of mistake, but so many people do, and it's a trap that you should avoid at all costs, because you'll go blind to things if you fall in love with a team or certain players.
Or a single player, yeah.
Yeah. Anything you want to add here, CJ, or do you want to get to your final point?
I'll just go ahead and get to my final point, because
All right.
you guys hit it on the nose. So my last point, man, is a space and time in fantasy football and football in general that I love, because this is where I get everything comes together as far as my projections and my rankings and everything, and I actually get to see it play out. And this is between training camp and preseason games, man. This is what I feel like, if you actually done your notes, did your rankings, put your players to the side, and you actually go see them work. And if you haven't, and you going into your draft, man, and you're actually picking up some diamonds in the rough in these preseason games, man. A couple candidates I think are diamonds in the rough is a Samaje Perine, a guy that right now is projected and should be the number one running back. But right now he's in a battle with Rob Kelly. I think because I know the Redskins organization as far as what they like to do when it comes to running the ball, I think he's going to be a better fit for them going into the season, and you're going to see it better when the pads are on and the games are actually live, and he's going to get more touches to be able to do that. Another situation when it comes to running back situation that's probably going to be better, I think it's going to be Kareem Hunt. Seeing him going out there and playing with the Chiefs, I think that's going to be another good diamond in the rough candidate for you to be able to see.
Man, he could be such a good sleeper.
Such a good sleeper. Zay Jones, a guy that you should be looking out for out in Buffalo, man. You know they need a number 2 wide receiver. That's a guy right there. I know he's dealing with some health concerns, but once he gets healthy and you see him working with Tyrod Taylor, I think that's a guy that you really need to look out for. Another dude that I like is, I know that a couple guys on the show don't really like him just because of the health concerns, but John Ross. If John Ross gets healthy and he gets that connection going with Andy Dalton, he is going to be a beast in that offense. I just see it. I'm just waiting to see the pads on and see him get this offense down. I think that's a guy that you want to be able to look out for, and I think he's going to be really good for you. I have to agree with Griffin with David Njoku. I think David Njoku is going to be a good contributor for the Cleveland Browns as a tight end. Another guy, Evan Ingram with the Giants, I think he's going to be good too. I want to see what he's going to be able to do in preseason and training camp. So for me, I love this time. I love this time of the year because I have all these names. I want to see they're going to check out. Now, not always you can be able to count on preseason games and say that is gospel and then be able to take that into the draft and go into the season and know for sure there's going to be that. But you get a good inclination of what this player is going to be like in this offense and how much he's going to be used, because it's about getting that chemistry down, especially when it comes to offensive players connected to quarterbacks. It's all about that chemistry and see them flowing in the offenses. So that's my advice for you as far as you can be able to get real good diamond in the roughs. It's always worked for me. I hope it works for you guys. Go ahead and implement it this year.
CJ, peeling back the curtain a little bit, going into future show topics there instead of.
Yeah, my bad.
Oh, you're good.
A little bit.
We're talking concepts here, and you're going ahead and you're giving sleepers and players and rookies to watch. I mean, there's counterpoints to all these guys, and that's exactly like what CJ's playing. Training camp is going to be very telling. Preseason games are going to be very telling, and it really comes down to because. People are going to stand out because it's preseason. Defenses are going to be as vanilla as they get. Offenses are going to be pretty darn vanilla as well. So you're going to see some players really stand out. So really make sure you also pay attention to the opportunity and the team. Because, you saw something like with Dak Prescott last year, where he looked really good in preseason, and then the opportunity was handed to him, so we knew that he had a great chance. But opposite side of the coin, a guy who everyone was starting to get really high on last year, Tajay Sharp in Tennessee, and that never truly materialized into anything. So it comes down to opportunity. The Titans are not, and this has been our concern, like we were talking about Delaney Walker earlier, not a very high volume passing offense. Not Marcus Mariota, still a very young quarterback. So people were really reaching for Tajay Sharp. I saw him going pretty early in drafts. I saw him going in, I think, 7th round was the highest I ever saw him go, which was insane. And obviously did not return on that value at all. So take all of that into account when you're watching preseason training camp. But like CJ said, there are so many players that have golden opportunities in front of them that have a chance to really look like they're putting it together in preseason. We'll be moving them up boards. Jason, anything you want to add?
No, I completely agree. I mean, you've got some very good opportunities here, but take it with a grain of sand. Look, one thing about this that you need to understand is that a complete turnaround for a team is very rare. To see a team go from not a very good passing team to the best passing team does not happen very often. So, Titans look good. We're expecting to see an uptick in passing. They're not going to be the best passing team in the league. It's not going to happen. Tajay Sharp is not going to suddenly become an absolute beast. It always comes in increments. So take your time, wait for that to happen, wait for you to see it, and then pick it, bench him, put him on your bench, but don't think he's going to be a wide receiver 1 for you.
Yeah. Jason, just make sure you don't tell him that. All right, we don't want you to be disappearing like that other guy. Tell him that.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
I forgot about that.
Wow.
I keep my left up.
Yeah, keep them leftovers.
We keep coming back to the Titans, and bottom line, just for the sake of that argument, Marcus Mariota needs to stay healthy for a full year. He needs to throw for over 3,500 yards, which he hasn't done yet, which I think people are kind of forgetting about. He hasn't reached the 4,000-yard threshold yet. So we've got some more points. We might take that over into our Patreon show, but we're going to have to start wrapping up here. Now, we kind of skipped this in the warm-up really fast, so we're going to go full circle, put the final touches on our draft really, really fast. A couple questions really fast. How do you guys feel about your team, and did you learn anything from your contrarian style? This is kind of our final wrap-up questions that we forgot about. You guys learn anything? Did you like the way things played out? Was there something you would have done differently? Obviously, I would have done my draft style.
I said before, that this was I thought it was a good test for me, just a little prequel, because another draft. I'm drafting later on in draft season. I'm going to be drafting around that frames a picks, being that 8th and 9th pick. I'm the 9th pick in that draft. So I to be able to see what kind of players I'm looking at that position, each round, it was just a good test for me to be able to see that. And then that strategy, I'm kind of positive I will not use that strategy going forward. That's not a strategy for me.
Positive.
Hardcore zero RB.
Yeah, I did not like that, especially when it got down to getting my running backs and then my quarterback. I did not like. So yeah, I'm not going to use that strategy. But I did like my first 3 wide receivers. Outside of that, I probably would stop it and then start looking at other positions. So yeah.
The fantasy community is so reactionary. I mean, now we're seeing all this advocation of 0 wide receiver this year, which people are trying to make an argument for, because like we said earlier on, there's so many more wide receivers to pull from, and there's less at the running back position. So people are trying to make this extensive argument, but the wide receivers, I think, are going to bounce back. It just be fluid. That's what we always do with all these draft strategies. I'm assuming that's kind of what you're going to say as well, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wish, instead of going with the hey, let's draft tight end and quarterback later, because that's really, for me, I let the draft come to me. If I don't like any of the tight ends in the 6th and 7th round, I'll wait until the 10th, 11th round and pick up a tight end there. And I've done that in several of my mock drafts. But that's the thing. I'm so fluid with how I draft, and I trust my board, that maybe I should have gone with like a zero RB instead, or even a 0 wide receiver things. That way I could have kind of seen how it affected me a little bit better. But the bottom line is, for me, it really just kind of reinforced what I want to do, because I waited until round 12 to pick my quarterback, which is something I don't normally do, but I still went with what was on my board, and I went with the best available guy on my board, and I was pretty happy with the outcome. So for me, I didn't really learn anything different other than the fact that, I really do need to trust my board.
Yeah. And for me, drafting super early, filling out my roster, I mean, obviously, I had Ezekiel Elliott, stud at running back, week-winning performer. I had the best quarterback and the best tight end in fantasy football in Aaron Rodgers and Rob Gronkowski. But because of that, I didn't have very much depth at running back or wide receiver, so I was having to draft a lot of boom-bust upside guys, which are not guys I'm comfortable taking because the consistency week to week is much more drastic at that point. So I would not use this strategy again. I would very happily go back to my drafting as much depth as possible at those skill positions strategy and then picking up these guys who are either streamable or guys who I think are going to have potential for breakout years later on in the drafts. That's just me. But to your point, Jason, we're going to be doing a lot more mock drafts down the line, so we'll have these opportunities. If you want to learn more about our mock draft, we're going to be posting the screenshot of what we had. Go back and listen to the mock draft episode. You can hear our thought process going into each pick. Last week on Friday, we talked extensively about all of the various points that we thought about the draft. We barely got into it a little bit during the warm-up. But yeah, that's going to do it for us today. So make sure you guys tune in on Friday where we are going to be taking a look at bust candidates. Obviously, no one wants to draft somebody who's going to bust for their team. I mean, so there's a lot of guys with a lot of question marks that we're all thinking are probably being drafted a little bit too high, or maybe some of the question marks around them aren't being really looked at fully. So again, that will be Friday's show. As we mentioned early on in the show, if you want to play against us in fantasy football, head over to iTunes, give us a rating, give us a review. You will automatically be entered in a chance to be randomly selected to play against us this season. Just iTunes, rating, review, leave a Twitter tag, an email address so we can reach you if you win, and make sure you guys subscribe. We're here every Tuesday and Friday through the off season, through draft season, through the regular season, through the playoffs, year-round. We will be here bringing you all the stuff you need to know to hopefully win your leagues and bring home some championships. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, or you can follow us individually. Of course, the show is at the FF Fanatics. I am at G Palmer FFF. CJ is at CJ Hickman 89. Jason is at Jason Cabrera 13. And we're moving on to our Patreon show, which we're going to be talking about some of these rookies to target. So, again, we'll go a little bit more in depth on some of these guys that CJ started talking about. So, all right, any parting thoughts before we sign off, guys?
Guys, hope you guys enjoyed your 4th.
Yeah. Enjoy the 4th. For our international listeners, I'm sure you know what our Independence Day is, but it's an American holiday, so we're going to go enjoy the 4th ourselves, get to our cookouts and stuff. So everyone take care, have a great holiday, have a great rest of your week. We will see you on Friday. Bye.
Griffin, you have problems, man.